tastes are very simple. I am easily satisfied with the best.
So indeed he was. Best food and wine, the best travel and hotels, a lavish country house, and retinues of servants and assistants.
Wants to journey on a gigantic yacht.
Do I want a yacht? Oh, how I do not.
Unlike his wife, he loved the French Riviera, and he frequently stayed at the luxurious villas of the press barons Lord Rothermere and Lord Beaverbrook, and the American socialite Maxine Elliot. It will be unthinkable now, but for Churchill, living well was an essential precondition for governing the country well. Churchill's extravagance began when he was a cavalry officer in India, where the cost of his uniforms and his polo ponies was substantially greater than his pay, and the meagre allowance he received via his mother from his father's estate. Although scarcely a model of financial probity herself, even she was appalled and outraged by her son's profligacy.
26th of February, 1897. Dearest Winnie, I must say I think it is too bad of you. Indeed, it is hardly honorable knowing as you do that you are dependent on me, and that I give you the biggest allowance I possibly could, more than I can afford.
28th of January, 1898. Dearest Mamma, there is no doubt that we are both equally thoughtless, spendthrift, and extravagant. Arrangements for paying are left to the future. I sympathize with your extravagances even more than you do with mine. I feel that you ought to have the dress, and I the polo pony.
True to their characters, neither of them curtailed their expenditure. But young Winston did set out to increase his income, partly by his journalism and his early books, and also by his lecture tours across Britain and the United States. Since at this time MPs were unpaid, Churchill needed the income very badly, and it would soon be augmented by the substantial advance he was given for writing the life of his father, and also, once he attained office, by his meagre ministerial salary. But even these three revenue streams proved insufficient. By the time of his marriage to the impecunious Clementine Hosier in 1908, Churchill had exhausted his earlier capital, and there were always unpaid bills lying around. To make matters worse, Churchill loved to gamble, much to Clementine's dismay and disapproval. But Churchill never kicked the habit, and he continued to gamble throughout his life with very mixed fortunes. There's a story that during a visit to a casino in Monte Carlo in 1945, he lost £7,000 in one single session, which is almost £200,000 in today's value. But his bad luck immediately turned to good luck when the manager refused to let this most illustrious gambler pay his debt, because he preferred to keep Churchill's cheque as a souvenir. Churchill's lifelong gambling was one of the many reasons why, as he himself admitted, the money simply drains away, and it was Clementine who was left to cope. She was urged by Mrs. Keppel, who had been one of King Edward VII's mistresses, to take a rich lover. But even to restore Winston's finances, there were some extremes to which Clementine refused to go. In 1922, Churchill purchased this house, Chartwell Manor, but it made his financial situation worse. Without even telling Clementine, he bought the place for £5,000 and then spent more than £15,000 on renovations and repairs, or just over £500,000 in modern-day values. This whole new wing was added on, containing the dining room, the sitting room, and Clementine's bedroom. And it didn't end there. Clementine was rightly appalled at what she foresaw would be an endless financial drain and worry, and however much money he earned from his writings, it was never enough to finance Churchill's lavish lifestyle. In the late summer of 1926, things were so bad that even he was driven to propose some economy measures to Clementine.
The big car should be used as little as possible. No more champagne is to be bought. Cigars must be reduced to 4 a day. No cream, unless specially sanctioned. cost of washing can surely be reduced, i.e. 2 white shirts a week should be quite enough for me for dinner in the country.
But the cigars, the cream, the fish, and even the shirts continued as before, and by 1929, Churchill thought he was doing extremely well. He wrote to Clemmy in September that year, setting out what he called his fruits of fortune and labour, and he calculated that his recently acquired American shares, combined with his literary earnings and capital gains, added up to a comfortable £22,000, which is more than £700,000 in today's money. On this basis, Churchill looked forward to a secure financial future. But it was a naive and over-optimistic document because it confused capital and income, and much of the money hadn't yet been earned. Coming from someone who'd recently been Chancellor of the Exchequer, it's an astonishing display of creative accounting. To make matters worse, within a month, Wall Street crashed in October 1929.
Thursday, 24th October, 1929. In an unprecedented wave of fear, confusion, and panic, nearly 13 million shares changed hands on the New York Stock Exchange today. Stocks were being dumped overboard for whatever they could bring, and prices plummeted as much as 10 points between sales.
As a result, Churchill's finances crashed too. Having invested heavily in American shares, he lost the equivalent of £500,000 at present-day prices. For once in his life, he really did have to retrench. That winter, Chartwell was run down to a low ebb. The big house was dust-sheeted, and only the study was left open, so he could work there. But retrenchment didn't last long. Since Churchill was out of office, he could devote more time to writing books and articles, and his income went up again, and during the 1930s, the normal and expansive style of living was resumed. Yet money worries continued to loom, because despite Churchill's increased earnings from his pen, he was still living beyond his means. For sale, 5 reception rooms, 19 bed and dressing rooms, 8 bathrooms, occupying a magnificent position in a valley on the southern slope of the Kentish Hills. So runs this estate agent's brochure from March 1938. It describes Chartwell, Churchill's family home in his haven, but he'd been forced to put up for sale at the modest asking price of £20,000, or just over £500,000 in modern-day values. It was a close call, but at the 11th hour, Chartwell and Churchill were saved by the intervention of an Anglo-South African financier who took over his debt for him. It's hard to imagine such an arrangement being acceptable in the very changed political climate of today. But there's no evidence that Churchill returned the favour, and Chartwell was safe for now.
I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
But in a manner that couldn't have been foreseen at any earlier stage in his career, Churchill's fortunes were about to change forever.
Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be. For without victory there is no survival.
The Second World War not only made Churchill very, very famous, but it also made him very, very rich. This miraculous transformation in his finances began while the fighting was still going on, as Churchill's words became not only more influential, but also much more valuable. By 1945, he'd been paid almost £2.5 million in today's currency for the film rights to some of his books and for the American rights to some of his wartime speeches. But Chartwell was still not safe, and in 1945 Churchill put it on the market again. This time the problem was his 3 older children, who had never actually managed to earn their livings. They'd inherited their father's capacity to spend, but not his capacity to earn, which meant he felt he had to provide for them. When the press baron Lord Camrose, a long-time friend and supporter, heard that Chartwell was on the market again, he was horrified that Churchill should even think of selling it. So he assembled a group of friends and admirers who anonymously bought Chartwell for £50,000 and presented it to the National Trust, with the proviso that Winston and Clementine could remain here for their lifetimes. Once again, Winston was rescued by a patron at the 11th hour, so it's not surprising that there's a portrait of Lord Camrose here on the walls at Chartwell. As a result, Churchill was able to provide for his children, and Chartwell would eventually become a great place of pilgrimage where so much of Churchill's life and Churchill's hinterlands is found on display. But it was the huge sums that Churchill obtained for the publication of his war memoirs that completed the transformation of his finances. In the aftermath of his electoral defeat in 1945, publishers were now clamouring for Churchill's latest literary venture. The result was an astonishingly complicated set of deals, which were altogether worth something in the region of £10 million in today's money. Not until J.K. Rowling would an English writer make so much money in their own lifetime, and Churchill finally achieved the financial security for himself and for his family that had always previously eluded him. Yet the worries about money that Winston and Clementine had lived with for so long were never fully allayed. In the words of his tax lawyer,
one had the feeling throughout all those years that he was always worried about dying a pauper.
He need not have worried. Thanks to Hitler, Churchill was no longer damned poor.
Churchill's Other Lives was written and presented by Sir David Cannadine with Roger Allam as Winston Churchill. It was produced by Melissa Fitzgerald, and it was a Blakeway production for BBC Radio 4. At the same time tomorrow, David explores how painting was Churchill's favourite hobby. In a couple of minutes after the news, Phoebe could do with some comforting, and Pat and Tom are alarmed in The Archers.
As part of World War I on the BBC, the epic drama Home Front returns to BBC Radio 4.
I want to use the talents I've developed to help women find work, and to help make men understand that they need us now and will need us more in the future.
Each episode set exactly 100 years ago today. Lava will have to at least think about employing women.
I wanted to be part of a great national endeavour. I wanted to play my part in helping my country.
Home Front, each weekday at midday, starting on Monday. Catch up with the series so far on the Radio 4 website.
BBC News at 2 o'clock. Jordan says it's prepared to release an Iraqi jihadist in return for a Jordanian pilot held captive by Islamic State. The militants have threatened to kill both the airman and a Japanese journalist they've also taken hostage. It's not clear whether the journalist would also be freed under the deal. The former Foreign Office Minister for the Middle East, Alistair Burt, said any prisoner swap would have negative consequences.
Of course there would be individual joy for families, and we can all understand that. But the terrorist aim is to split its opponents. It is to turn the moral case away from itself because it is solely responsible. The only way to prevent this is for there to be no terms of trade whatsoever, for the terrorists to know that this will never happen, for them to be blamed completely, and for allies not to be split.
The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah has carried out an attack on an Israeli military convoy near the border with Lebanon. The Israeli army says 4 of its soldiers were wounded. Tension has been growing since an Israeli airstrike killed Hezbollah fighters in Syria 10 days ago. The Conservatives and Labour have clashed over new guidance issued to hospitals in the West Midlands over whether they can declare a major incident. Some senior NHS staff there say it's an attempt to stop them resorting to the measure, a claim denied by NHS England. Labour says the guidance shows the NHS is in crisis, but the government insists it's purely a local matter, and had accused Labour of wanting to weaponise the NHS as an electoral issue. An analysis of spending on social care for the elderly by English councils suggests it's fallen by 20% in real terms in the last decade. The research by the BBC indicates increasing demand means average spending per person has fallen from £1,200 in 2003 to £950 10 years later. Tesco says up to 2,000 people could lose their jobs as a result of its store closure programme announced earlier this month. The 43 sites, which have been named today, include 7 superstores and 6 Home Plus outlets. BBC News.
In a quarter of an hour, in G.F. Newman's Corrupted, Brian becomes scared of Jack's madness. Before that, Jennifer's worried about her family in The Archers.
I'll make her some coffee in a minute. Oh, sorry it's been a bit of a scratch lunch.
That's fine.
Well, I can promise you something better this evening. I've invited Lillian round.
For the third degree?
No, just to see if she's all right. I'm sure there's something going on with Matt, though.
Well, there usually is.
Oh, he's been away for several days now.
Come on, he was in Russia for months.
Yes, I know.
Well, I'm sure you'll get it all out of Lillian this evening.
I hope so. Oh, I've got enough to worry about at the moment.
This is Phoebe. I've told you, darling, all teenagers are secretive.
It's not like her, though. She's changed.
If Kate was my mum, I'd value a bit of privacy, too.
Oh, I think she's missing Hayley. She could always confide in her.
She sees her.
Well, not so much since Kate got home. And I think Hayley felt she ought to back off a bit.
That's very tactful of her.
Yeah. Of course, it might be Kate who's bothering Phoebe.
Embarrassing her, you mean?
Oh, yes, look at those photos of her with all those poor friends.
Who she's known for 5 minutes.
Oh, I know.
Pussycat ears at her.
Oh, she's just trying too hard, that's all. She really wants to fit in, but she's...
Not very helpful for Phoebe.
No, she needs a mother.
Lucky she got such a devoted grandmother.
Thank you, darling, I do try.
Maybe a bit too hard. Perhaps instead of attempting to read people's minds all the time, you could just ask them what's going on.
Yeah, I could certainly do with having an honest conversation with Kate.
Good luck with that.
I don't think she's talked to Lucas once since she got back.
You okay with that, Mum?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yogurts aren't as heavy as veg.
Wish there was a bit more of our own stuff in here.
Ah, the time of year, isn't it? We always have to take more bought in.
Is that a lot for you?
Yeah, it's all Tina asked for.
Do you think it's enough?
Ah, wouldn't have been when Helen was running the shop. No. How about the veg?
Less than I expected to take.
Oh, I suppose if sales are down, she doesn't want it sitting there rotting.
That's sensible.
It's sensible for the situation she's got herself into. But she doesn't seem to be doing much to change that.
God thinks he's got it all sorted with her now.
Yeah, well, I don't think even Helen quite believes that.
No, she didn't seem convinced.
She can't be. Or why is she asking us to take a look?
I was a bit surprised.
Oh, Tom, I could do without this extra worry. Dad could be home soon.
I know, he's doing really well, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He talks about nothing else. He can't wait to get stuck in.
Exactly. That's just not realistic, Tom. All these plans he's got for the farm.
I know. He's even talking about getting a new bull. Has he said that to you?
Yes. It was quite a shock.
Of course.
But, to be honest, when he comes back, he's not going to be picking up where he left off.
No.
I mean, let's face it, he's not even going to be able to get upstairs. He's not going to have the energy for farm work. He'll need it all just to get well again.
Yes. But I'm here now. He can rely on me, and so can you.
Thanks, love. That is such a relief to us both.
Is that tonight?
Yes. I thought of making apple pie for pudding.
Good idea.
It's very comforting food. Oh, don't worry, it's vegan pastry.
Thanks. Do you think Lillian's going to need some comfort?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
I might have a fruit tea. Do you want one?
Oh, yes, that'd be nice. Yeah, I think that Phoebe might need a bit of comforting.
Phoebe?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Why?
Oh, you must have noticed how quiet and withdrawn she is. She's always on Facebook or texting.
Oh, everyone's like that now.
I think it's more than that. She's positively avoiding having conversations with us.
I hadn't noticed.
Ah, darling, you talk enough for two.
I don't. Well, not all the time. But if you think it's a problem...
I think the person that Phoebe might really like to talk to is Haley.
About Roy?
Oh, about anything, really. They just haven't seen much of each other lately.
Because Haley finds it hard to talk about what happened with Roy. I can understand that.
No, I don't think that's the reason. It's since you came back. She doesn't want to tread on your toes.
What? Oh, well, that's silly. I've always told Phoebe she's lucky she's got 2 mums.
Yes, but maybe you just need to make it clearer to both of them that you're okay with it.
Well, that's easy. How would it be if I offered to drive Phoebe over to Birmingham?
It's a really good idea.
Fine. Here's your tea, Mum. I'd let it brew for a bit.
Right, yes, well, I'll finish this off.
I've been thinking about another practical thing I could do to help Phoebe.
Yes?
We should move into my cottage as soon as the current tenant's gone.
Oh, right.
I want to make a proper home for her.
Oh, I hope we've done that here.
Well, of course you have, but I mean for the 2 of us. After what Roy's put her through, well, I want to start putting that right now I'm home.
Even though we'll only have you for a relatively short time.
Well, a whole year. Time to rebuild my relationship with Phoebe.
Oh,
I've let her down so often. And trust between a mother and daughter is the most precious thing there is.
well, it is, of course it is. And I'd like to think that you can trust me.
Of course I can.
Well then, can you please tell me what's really going on with you and Lucas?
That.
But I'm not meaning to pry, but when I know that you haven't spoken to him since you got back...
That's because he won't speak to me.
Oh, Kate. Are things really that bad between you?
Our marriage is over.
No.
It's finished. I'm sorry, I just didn't know how to tell you.
Well, what happened?
His parents happened. They were always interfering and poisoning Lucas's mind against me, and now they've started on the children.
Do you mean?
And Ollie won't speak to me.
What? You mean they won't let her?
They turned her against me, Mum. First Lucas, and now the children.
Oh, darling. Oh, why on earth didn't you tell me all this before?
I couldn't bear to talk about it.
Well, don't worry. You've got some bridges to build, and well, surely I can help you do that.
I don't know, Mum. I hope so.
Maybe they're thinking they're acting for the best.
Oh, alienating 2 innocent children from their mother. I can't believe you're taking their side.
I'm not, darling. I'm as upset about this as you are.
Well then.
But the situation might be a bit more complicated than you think.
Well, it seems pretty straightforward to me.
I mean, there are cultural differences, aren't there? Kate's explained that.
Cultural differences?
It's not so unusual for children to be brought up by their grandparents.
No, because their parents are working away or studying abroad or something. I don't think there's any culture in the world that thinks poisoning a child's mind against their own mother is a good idea.
Well, you just don't know for a fact that's what they're doing.
I know what Kate's told me.
Well, that was rather my point.
I'm not suggesting she'd lie about something like this.
Of course not, but I just...
Look, where's Lucas in all of this? Why doesn't he stand up to them? I mean, why doesn't he stand up for Kate?
Well, maybe he should, but if they're so estranged...
Oh, whatever's happened between them, she's still Nolly and Sibo's mother.
Of course. But he may have his reasons.
I can't imagine what. Just what are you getting at?
What I'm saying, darling, is that there are 2 sides to every story, and we've only heard Kate's.
Look, our daughter's marriage is over. She's in danger of being permanently estranged from her children.
And you've got Lillian coming in half an hour for another counselling session. Hadn't you better go and have a little lie down?
Well, that told us all we needed to know, didn't it? Only 2 customers the whole time we were there. She did say it had been a slow week. Just as well. Much of them to buy if they did turn up.
It's not Tina's fault if Rob's telling her to override Helen's order pattern.
No, it's his. He's got no right to interfere.
That hasn't stopped him before.
He just
doesn't understand the organic business. And the person who does isn't there.
It is missing Helen's touch.
Of course it is. It was her enthusiasm and flair that made Ambridge organic.
I know.
She's got so much on her plate at the moment.
We'll have to do something.
We can't let things slide any longer. Maybe Helen will have to come back.
That's easy to say, Mum. But will she?
So, Matt's not back from his business trip yet.
No.
You're missing him, poor you. All alone in that big
Jenny, I just want a nice, relaxing evening. I don't want to discuss that.
Well, I'd like that too, but I can't for that. With you in this state.
I'm not in a state.
Yes, you are. You look as though you haven't slept in a week. You're obviously worried sick about something.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk about it.
Don't do this, Lillian. If Matt's been up to his old tricks, if you're having to protect that man again.
Oh, you needn't worry about that. I'm never going to have to protect Matt again.
Oh, good. So you have said that before.
Yeah, but it's different this time.
Well, you said that before as well.
Well, he won't be here for me to protect. He's gone. Gone for good.
What?
Left me high and dry. Done a moonlight flit, so I've got nothing left to protect.
But how could he do that after all you've been through together?
You tell me.
The way you've stood by him time and time again.
Yeah, it's a mystery, isn't it? All I know, he's in Costa Rica and he's not coming back.
So that's where you went together.
I hated it. That's why he chose it. Somewhere he was sure I'd never follow him.
Oh, well, I doubt that's true. Is he alone in Costa Rica?
Oh, Jenny. You always did think the worst of Matt, didn't you?
Oh, because I was usually right. Am I this time?
Yes. Oh, you know Matt. Always got another card up his sleeve.
Oh, Lillian, don't joke about this. It's heartbreaking.
Well, he's broken mine. I'm alone now, and I always will be. All alone. Without my tiger.
At 3 this afternoon, Paul Lewis will be taking your calls about your state pension. What will it be worth? When do you reach state pension age? For answers to these and other queries, please phone 03700 100 444. The lines are open now. That's 03700 100 444. And the programme takes care in 45 minutes. And now on Radio 4, it's time for our drama and return to G.F. Newman's The Corrupted, a tough and uncompromising series set in 1960s Britain. With prejudiced language and attitudes prevalent at the time, Ross Kemp tells the story of how one family continues to hunger for success, no matter what the cost.
The best things in life are free, but you can keep them for the best and please not give me more.
We present G.F. Newman's The Corrupted.
The war in Vietnam continued through 1968 and got more and more bloody, with the Americans gaining no ground against the Viet Cong. More people joined the anti-war campaign, with 80,000 protesters besieging the American embassy in Grosvenor Square. Clashes with the mounted police got almost as bloody, with hundreds of arrests. Meanwhile, the Labour government rushed through legislation to stem the tide of Asian immigrants flooding in from stripe-torn East Africa. None of these immigrants were helping my dad's rental business to prosper. Although they didn't mind crowding 30 to a house, they were smart enough to club together to buy the house. There was much resentment towards them, mostly because they didn't want to integrate into the community. They kept their own language and customs.